Okay, so it's good to see everybody today. Hope all are well, and we begin today the second book of the Torah, the book of Shemot. Because somebody is coming in. We're beginning the book of Shemot, and with the portion Shemot, book of Exodus. The portion begins on 317 in the Eitz Chaim, but I want to look today at chapter 3. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So chapter 3, somebody else is coming in. One second here. Okay. So chapter 3 is on page 326 of Eitz Chaim. It's the beginning of the fourth Aliyah, whatever edition of Chumash you have. And I want to look through this chapter because of the important spiritual event that happens to Moses, and how it impacts not only Moses's career, but also our understanding of God's relationship to Moses and to the Jewish people in general. So again, we're on 326 in the Eitz Chaim, the beginning of chapter 3, or what's listed there as the fourth Aliyah of the portion Shemot. So the context, we're introduced to the birth of Moses at the end of chapter 1 of the book of Exodus, after the Pharaoh of Joseph's time dies and a new Pharaoh arises, who issues a decree because of how quickly and exponentially the children of Jacob, the Israelite family, has expanded. They are seen as a threat to Egyptian society, and so the new Pharaoh has decided to kill all newborn Israelite baby boys and let the girls stay alive. And he's tried to enlist the help of the Hebrew midwives, Shifra and Puah. So Moses is saved. He's put in a basket, and none other than Pharaoh's daughter saves him from the Nile and raises Moses in the palace. Somehow Moses understands that he's an Israelite, even though being raised in Pharaoh's palace. He's an adult and sees an Israelite slave being tortured by an Egyptian taskmaster, and Moses kills the taskmaster, and then the next day sees two Israelites fighting with each other, and he goes to break up that fight, and one says, do you plan to kill us like you killed the Egyptian taskmaster? That's when Moses knew that he needed to get out of town to save himself. So he flees to Midian, somewhere in the Sinai. We don't know exactly where. You look at the map in the back of our Eitz Chaim, and Midian is listed across from the Gulf of Aqaba. So if you can picture how the point of the Sinai comes down like this, so with Egypt being on this side, as you're looking at my hands, and this is the bottom of the Sinai where my hands come together. Midian is said to be over the water there. Doesn't make sense to me how that would be the case. How did he get over the water? But anyway, that's what scholars think. He's in Midian, and there's another story of meeting a woman at the well. This time it's Tzipporah and her 6 sisters and falls in love with Sipporah, marries Sipporah, whose father happens to be the Midianite priest Jethro. Okay, and so that's the context. So he's in Midian, kind of waiting, biding his time until the news of what he did in Egypt kind of dies down and people forget about him. So, chapter 3. Umoshe haya ro'eh et son yitro chotno kohen Midian, vayinhag et atzon achar hamidbar, vayavo el har Elohim choreva. And Moses was shepherding the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he drove the flock. So I'm using the word drove because it can apply to shepherding a flock. So that's what it means. I'm using it in a modern context. A nahag in modern Hebrew is a driver of a car, a bus, or a truck is called a nahag. Linhog is to drive. Okay, so in the modern context, it's operating a vehicle. In the Torah context, it's leading a flock, kind of directing the flock to go in whatever direction you want it to go. So you can understand how the modern word comes from the ancient usage of it. So he was driving the flock, achar hamidbar. Does that mean behind the wilderness? Now, so it says into the wilderness. I'm trying to be literal. So after the wilderness, to the side of the wilderness, behind the wilderness, whatever it is, into the wilderness would be better. Vayinhag et hatzon bamidbar or el hamidbar. Achar hamidbar is just unusual wording, which leads to the commentary below the line, especially the medieval commentators, to point out the unusual phrasing. That's just not the way you would say it in terms of wherever Moses is leading the flock. You don't lead something behind something unless you're trying to teach us something. You're leading the flock to somewhere, not to the behind. So you get what I'm saying, that it's kind of unusual phrasing. And then we'll get to the commentary in a moment. So he leads the flock there, and he approached the mountain of God to Chorev. So the mountain of God is called Chorev, and this is the older word for Mount Sinai. Okay, so it's like there are other places in the Torah in which there are place names that have new names. So Kiryat Arba is also Hebron, Luz is also Bethel. So a couple of places like that. So Chorev is also Mount Sinai. So that's why I'm thinking that where the on the map in the Eitz Chaim where it says Midian is, that's not where Mount Sinai is. Or that's not where Mount Sinai generally or traditionally is. There are some Bible scholars today who think that Mount Sinai is there in what is Saudi Arabia today. But most people, and certainly the tradition is that Mount Sinai is in the Sinai Peninsula, hence the name of the peninsula, and kind of around there in the middle towards the east of the Sinai Peninsula. Anyway, so that's the mountain that Moses is leading the flock. So there's commentary here, very bottom of 326 onto 327, drove the flock into the wilderness. Why into the wilderness? So in other words, why the phrase achar hamidbar, this unusual phrase? Why this backwards route? Rashi suggests that this was necessary to prevent the flocks from grazing on someone else's land, for that would be theft. So in other words, Moses led the flock in a way that was kind of behind someone else's greater pasture land into kind of no man's land or pasture land that kind of belonged to no one and therefore to everyone. So that's Rashi's idea of why it says Achar Hamidbar. Sforno, who lived a couple hundred years after Rashi in Italy, says that it was to be free of distractions so that Moses could meditate. All right, so this is based on what happened at Mount Sinai, right, with the burning bush. So the commentaries mostly comment in a way that assumes that we've already read ahead. Okay, so with that, we already know the story and that we've read the story many, many times. So all of us who are on Zoom now are old enough to have read the story many times already. So we know about Moses and the burning bush. So Sforno perhaps is thinking, that encounter at the burning bush is only possible if someone like Moses is in the spiritual mindset to have such an encounter. So someone who is spiritually trained is able to be aware that there's a bush burning like that, and to be aware that God's presence is in that bush. So there has to be some history there to lead Moses to that encounter, and perhaps behind the wilderness is his way of saying that a place where he'd be alone, no other flocks would be there, and while you're watching your sheep eat, there's a lot of downtime in that. I mean, you're looking out for animals of prey, but most of the time you're kind of like sitting there under a tree in the shade as your sheep are busy eating. Sheep and goats are busy eating, and so it's a time that you could meditate. So, okay, so that's Sforno's suggestion. So Rashi says behind the wilderness means away from somebody else's property. Sforno says behind the wilderness means a place to be alone and to meditate. Okay, the Midrash, which preceded Rashi and Sforno, the rabbinic Midrash from 1500, 1800 years ago, tells a story of a lamb running away and Moses chasing it into the wilderness. God, taking notice, decides that this is a man of compassion, fit to be the leader of the people. Right? So you have to wonder, like the rabbis do, who is this Moses and what qualified him to be chosen by God to be the leader of the people? So often the greatest leaders in biblical history of the Jewish people are shepherds. So you have Moses, who's a shepherd. You have King David, who's a shepherd, right? When he was chosen to among his brothers to be the one to kill Goliath or to face off against Goliath, he was a shepherd, and he was out shepherding his father Jesse's flocks. So he's King David, the greatest of all kings, author of the book of Psalms, was a shepherd. Moses, the greatest of all leaders and prophets, was a shepherd. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were shepherds. Okay, so there's something about the quality of or the type of person a shepherd is that relates to being a good leader. So the rabbis made up a story to show what the particular quality Moses had as a shepherd. So the story goes that Moses kept a close count of all the sheep in the flock, or sheep and goats in the flock, and it was always concerned that he didn't lose any one of the goats or the sheep. So when it was time to try to bring in the flock together and go back home for the night, Moses sees that one sheep is missing, and it happens that, and he sees that it's a lamb that's missing. So he goes chasing and looking for this lamb, and the lamb happens to have climbed part of Mount Sinai. And because Moses found this lamb and cared about this one lamb, who knows how many scores of sheep and goats, and maybe one wouldn't have gone missing, but Moses cared about that one, shows that Moses cares about every single human being in the community of Israel. And because of that, God revealed God's self to Moses at the burning bush, because that's the next thing that happens in the story. So that's what the Midrash suggests about why Moses is chosen and what shepherding has to do with that. So the commentary concludes here on 327. God, taking notice, decides that this is a man of compassion, fit to be the leader of the people. The first interpretation emphasizes Moses' commitment to justice and ethical behavior. The second sees him as a mystic, a man in search of God's presence. The third describes his compassion. So all three, the commentary below the line decides to highlight these particular comments to show the different aspects of what it means to be a good leader. One, caring about justice. One, also connected to the spiritual side, the religious side, to God, right? So a leader of the Israelite people is not just a secular leader caring about ethics and justice, but also a religious leader helping to steer the people towards a religious life as well. So the mystical idea is there too. And then you also want a leader who is compassionate, not corrupt and seeking power, but caring about each and every one in the community. Okay, so that's the comments about verse 1. So Moses is drawn somehow to the mountain of God, to Horeb, and the Midrash fills in the gap as why he's drawn there. Okay, Vayera malach Adonai elav belabat esh mitoch hasneh vayar vehine hasneh boer ba'esh vehasneh enenu ukal. So he saw an angel of God appeared to him. So Vayera, he saw, but so it better appeared, as the English translation has. And so an angel of God appeared to him in the flame of fire, or it says blazing fire, okay, and a blazing fire from within the bush. Now it says a bush. The Hebrew is the bush. So I'm not sure why it says the bush. The bush implies that the reader knows what bush we're talking about. Now, we don't know what bush we're talking about. So two ideas. Well, let me finish translating the sentence. So an angel of God appears out of flaming fire from within the bush, and he saw it. Moses saw the fire within the bush, or he saw, and behold, the bush is burning with fire, and the bush is not being consumed. So in other words, this fire is burning, but it has no effect on the bush itself. So if we can imagine, this is in the desert, in the wilderness, no water, it's dry. This bush, if there's fire there, is going to be like going up in flames so quickly, like that, like kindling. It would disappear in a moment, just a lowly bush like that. So it's not disappearing. So that's unusual. So two things about this bush being the bush. So where traditionally we think Mount Sinai is, it's called by the Arabs Jebel Musa, Mount Moses. It's called otherwise on the map Santa Catarina. There's a monastery there. So the Christians knew from the early Middle Ages about the history of the site. So in the rise of Christianity, when monasteries developed and convents developed around the Christian world, you look for places where there's a history of encounters with God. So the Christians found Jebel Musa, and made it Santa Caterina and built a monastery there. There's supposedly a caper bush there at that monastery that is thought by the monks there to be the burning bush of this story from 3,000 years ago. Okay, maybe it is. Most likely it's not, because I'm not sure what the lifespan of a bush is, as opposed to a redwood tree or an olive tree, which are known to live for centuries. A bush, a lowly bush, whether it's a caper bush, we don't know what kind of bush it is. It just says here a bush. Okay, so that could give it then, because the monks at Santa Caterina pointed out that bush, saying the bush. There was also an article in the New York Times last year about an archaeologist, Bible scholar, who thinks that there's a place in the Sinai region somewhere where at one time of year, when the light strikes just right, it's kind of like Machu Picchu in Peru, what the Incans do. They have their temple where the window is just right so that on the summer solstice, on June 21st, the light shines exactly right through the window, lighting up all the inlaid gold things there to make a huge, bright, flame-like appearance. So this particular Bible scholar thinks this happens either in the southern Negev or in the Sinai desert, in this one place along the side of a mountain, and it lights up. The light shines just away on a bush that happens to be on the side of the cliff. If you just Google that story, Bible scholar, bush, lighting up, desert, the article should come up in the New York Times about it. And like I said, it was sometime early last year, early 2022, something like that. Anyway, so I think it happened sometime in the wintertime. So that could work in the chronology of the story here, because it takes a while for Moses to get back into Egypt. And then if the Exodus happened in April, then maybe the December time frame for this story occurring, because we have no idea when it occurred, could work with this idea of the light shining on the bush just right. Okay, who knows? For me, it doesn't matter. And I'll just say this in general, I've said this before, to read this story as if it actually happened, I think takes away from the bigger sense of what the story is here for. In other words, it's not important to me whether the bush and Mount Sinai is where Santa Caterina is. I could care less. And it doesn't matter to me if the Bible scholar thinks, or the archaeologist thinks, that he found where the light shines on the cliff the right way. It doesn't matter to me to prove that this place existed. What matters to me is that this story is part of our Jewish tradition. It's part of our religious tradition, and the impact of the story, what the result of the story, is more important than the details of the story itself. So that's why I say it doesn't matter to me whether this bush existed or not. That's not, for me, that's not how I read the Torah. I don't read the Torah to say, oh, everything here had to have happened. I don't know if it happened. It doesn't matter if it happened, but certainly with the Haggadah, every year at Passover, it happened. So it's part of our tradition. It's been part of our tradition for more than 2,000 years. And so we keep maintaining the elements of the story. Okay, and that's why one of our Torah covers in our ark has a representation of this burning bush and the phrase Hasne Enenu Ukal. And in fact, it's the logo of mine and my father's rabbinical school, the Jewish Theological Seminary. This is the logo. The bush was not consumed, meaning Jews have not died. We're still around, and we're still studying Torah. So that's becomes a metaphor for Jewish Torah life. Okay, so Moses sees this unusual sight, this bush not being consumed. And verse 3, Vayomer Moshe, Moses said, Asurana ve'er'eh et hamar'eh hagadol hazeh, madua lo yivar hasneh. So Moses says, I must turn and see the sight, this great sight. Why is the bush not burning? Right, not burning up, not being consumed. 4, Vayar Adonai kisar lirot, vayikra elav Elohim mitoch hasneh, vayomer Moshe, Moshe, vayomer hineni. God saw that he turned aside to see, meaning God saw that Moses turned to see, and God called to him. Vayikra elav Elohim. God called to him from within the bush, Vayomer, and said, Moshe, Moshe. Vayomer, and Moses said, Hineni. So now, the angel, it was first an angel of God appearing to Moses. Then it was God talking to Moses. So is God talking through the angel? Is God independent of the angel? We don't know. We just wanted to point out, if we're keeping score here, keeping track, there's an angel of God and now God. Okay, and God with two names, Yud-He Vav-He, and also Elohim, which, if I were a Bible scholar, I would comment on, so who wrote the story? Is it the J author or is it the E author? Because we have J for the Yud-He Vav-He, we have E for Elohim, right? The documentary hypothesis of the authorship of the Torah, J, E, P, and D authors, the Jehovah, the Elohim, the priestly, and then the Deuteronomic, and then there's an R, the redactor. So just look that up and you can see the different, which verses in the Torah belong to which authors. I don't know verse 4, which has both J and E in it, how this works. But God, Yud-He Vav-He, saw Moses, and then Elohim speaks to Moses and says, Moshe, Moshe. Now, it's just interesting. And there isn't any commentary about this below. Why Moses' name is repeated? Because I don't think God, when God spoke to Abraham, that Abraham's name was repeated, or Isaac's, or Jacob's. So I don't remember an Abraham, Abraham. I don't remember a Yitzchak, Yitzchak, and I don't remember a Yaakov, Yaakov. Now, it's possible later in the Bible that other people needed their name called twice. I'm just saying that's interesting. Why is the name, like, is Moses too deep in the focused on the appearance? And then, yes, Laurie is pointing out, in the Bible, repetition of a name often characterizes a direct divine call. All I'm saying, Laurie, is that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who we only know so far in the Bible, were only called once. What happens later is a different story. I'm just saying Moses, in the context of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that this is unusual. And perhaps it reflects Moses being so intent on what's happening to the bush, that he's really involved in this mystical reverie, that it takes a while to be brought out of it, even by God, and that it takes God 2 times until Moses understands that God's talking to him. Okay, so it could get to Sforno's idea here that Moses has become a mystic, right? He grew up in Pharaoh's house in the palace. You're not exactly thinking that that's a place to learn how to be a mystic. And then he ends up in the desert. We don't know how long he's in the desert for, but often people who live in a desert become mystics. And I often reference the movie The Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston. Charlton Heston's appearance is very different from when he goes up Mount Sinai to get the Ten Commandments, and then after he gets the Ten Commandments. And that Cecil B. DeMille did that on purpose to show that something mystical, something spiritual transformed Moses. So just the way he looks is a reflection of the different characters. So perhaps something has happened to Moses in his time in the desert to even allow the Midianite priest to have this stranger live in his household, and then to be aware of some things that are happening in nature that maybe the average non-mystic, non-meditative person would not notice. All right, so maybe the Moshe is even a reflection of how intently Moses was focused here. Okay, verse 5. Vayomer al tikrav halom shal ne'alecha ne'al raglecha ki hamakom asher ata omed alav admat kodesh hu. Vayomer, we're assuming here this is God. God says, don't draw close here, or this place, or do not come closer, right? Don't get any closer. Take off your shoes from off your feet. So just interesting, for those who care about wasted words, take off your shoes. Well, you would think that would be enough. Why does it have to say take off your shoes from off your feet? Where else is Moses wearing his shoes? All right, so just, so maybe more formal, but I'm just saying, if you're a careful reader of the text, why the extra phrase? Take off your shoes from off your feet, because the place upon which you are standing on, also extra words, the place upon which you are standing on it is holy ground. Okay, so how was Moses supposed to know that? Was it always so? Obviously, it wasn't always holy ground, because if it was always holy ground, Moses would have known that. And clearly, the fact that this bush is burning in this way makes it different, and the fact that God's speaking from the bush makes it holy. So, in order, often in religion classes that I've had, both in college and especially in rabbinical school, when they ask, how do you define the word holy, right? How would you define the word holy? It's kind of hard to define the word holy. So perhaps this helps us give a definition of holy. Somehow God is involved in it. So this burning bush has God's voice emanating from it, so the land around it becomes holy. Anything touched by God would be holy, but that's not the only definition of holy. Doesn't mean just touched by God. Okay, so anyway, verse 6. I just want to see if there's anything. Right, so the commentary below the line about taking off the shoes, right? This is not a Jewish thing anymore, by the way. It's a Muslim thing. It's a Japanese thing, right? Two cultures where you come to mind quickly, where taking off shoes is involved, right? Going into a mosque means if you're going into the room to pray, you got to take off your shoes. If you're going into a Japanese home, you have to take off your shoes. Why? So below the line, remove your sandals from your feet. Now, I said shoes. The translation here says sandals. Well, perhaps they were sandals. The modern word na'alayim means shoes. There's a different word for, I think, the word for sandals is sandal. So sandalim would be sandals, but can you say na'alayim for sandals? Not sure. Maybe in the Torah you would, because there's no such thing as shoes as we know them in the time of the Torah. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Shoes not only carry the dirt and defilement of the world into the presence of God. All right, so there's that idea that you're bringing in profane dirt into a holy precinct. So it's symbolically, but you have the dirt on you, on your whole being, right? Your clothes are also bringing in from the outside. Your skin is also bringing from the outside. So symbolically, your hat. So symbolically, taking off your shoes is something we're doing in a concrete way to say we're now leaving this world that we exist mostly in, and we're entering this holier place. So by taking off our shoes, we're doing something concrete, something physical to help us understand that where we are right now is different and better and more sacred than where we usually conduct our affairs. So I think it's a beautiful idea to take off shoes in that way. So now, but also the commentary goes on. They symbolize the effort of the well-to-do to shield themselves from the pain felt by the poor, right? Especially in the time of the Torah. Not everybody wore sandals. A lot of people went barefoot. And it's dangerous to walk barefoot because you're susceptible to whatever's on the ground that you're walking on. Whereas if you're wearing a shoe, you don't have to worry so much about what you're walking on. Your feet are protected. So it's the well-to-do who would have their feet protected, and by wearing shoes, kind of lose a sense of what other people are feeling. So by taking off the shoe, it's also helping us be more sensitive to everyone. That we are like everyone else. So taking off the shoe is this religious transitional thing. It's also a societal compassionate thing. And remove your shoes may be a way of saying to Moses, bottom of 328, remove from yourself everything that would keep you from identifying with the suffering of your people. So specifically for Moses, perhaps the message here is become more aware of who you are and the suffering that your people are going through. Okay, so that's all about the taking off of the shoes. But it's just interesting that for some reason that hasn't become a Jewish custom. In fact, there are some who say that it's inappropriate to pray barefoot. That you really need to have shoes on as a matter of respect, right? So, I mean, so there are some who say if you're wearing socks, it's okay, but being barefoot, maybe not so okay to pray. I'm just saying not everybody says that, but there is a layer in Jewish law that of those rabbis who say that what you're supposed to wear when you pray, you certainly can't pray naked. There are people who suggest the kind of clothes that you need to wear in order to pray. So in other words, if we walked into an ultra-Orthodox synagogue right now dressed the way we were dressed, some might not even let us in. Even if, I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt, but it's rolled up to my elbows. Even if I rolled the sleeves down and made them long sleeves, and I'm wearing long pants, and I'm wearing shoes. Still, I'm not wearing a white shirt. I'm not wearing black pants. I'm not wearing black shoes. And I'm not wearing tzitzit. So I might even not be allowed into an ultra-Orthodox synagogue dressed the way I am. I could say this because we were invited to Lenore's first cousin's daughter's wedding in Lakewood, New Jersey. And the wedding invitation came with an insert ensuring that we were dressed appropriately, that men were recommended to wear a dark suit and white shirt, and women were not allowed to wear red in their dress at all. So not just for how to pray, but also in how to attend a wedding. That's, again, in some circles within the ultra-Orthodox world, Dress is very important today, reflecting a matter of respect. So in some circles, taking off your shoes is a matter of respect. In other circles, in Jewish circles, it's a sign of disrespect to take off your shoes. Verse 6, page 320.
Just about the
Yes, go ahead,
shoes,
Rita.
we take off our shoes when we sit Shiva. We don't wear shoes.
Right. So that's another reason to wear shoes when you pray. For most of the time, we're
Right.
not sitting Shiva, right? God willing, thank God. So yes, taking off your shoes will be seen as a sign of mourning, not a sign of religious aptitude or a higher spiritual sense, right? So yes, that's a very important point, Rita. Thank you for making that connection. That's right. So in Judaism, taking off your shoes is a sign of mourning, and so we don't want to be in a time of mourning and a time of praying, and so which is why a mourner before the funeral, after death, before the funeral, mourner is not supposed to come to shul. And someone in the midst of Shiva who comes to shul is not supposed to get an aliyah, because the mourner's presence would bring down the level of joy of everyone in the community, right? And the mourner, him or herself, is focused on the funeral and not on praying. And that intense period of mourning from the death until the funeral, the mourner is supposed to only focus on that. And during Shiva, the mourner in shul is supposed to sit in a different place than usual and not receive an honor, because we just don't want to, we want to ensure that the entire community's joy of Shabbat is still able to be celebrated. Okay, so yeah. So verse 6, Vayomer Anochi Elohei Avicha, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Vayaster Moshe Panav Ki Yarei Mehabit El HaElohim. God said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So that's just interesting. So, right, when we say the Amida 3 times a day, every day, we say Baruch atah Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. So God of each one. It would be shorter to say Elohei Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. Right? That you save a couple of words there, and you still get the same effect, that the God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah. But specifically, the prayer says, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, God of Sarah, God of Rebecca, etc. Okay, so it comes from here, why it is that way. And certainly the idea behind this is that God had, it doesn't say this below the line, but each one of our ancestors, the matriarchs and the patriarchs, each one had a unique relationship with God. And that it's not a cookie cutter relationship, but rather based on the personality, based on the need, the relationship was different. And so perhaps by understanding, by pointing out God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, that God had a unique relationship with each one, God is now establishing a unique relationship with Moses. And by us saying the Amida 3 times a day, we hope to establish a unique relationship with God too. All right, so I am the God of your father, your father, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. And Moses turned his face away because he was afraid to look at God. So it's just interesting that the word to be afraid is also related to the word to see. So do with that what you want, but it's because he was afraid to see or to look at God. So Moses first turned aside to approach the bush, and now he's turning aside because he's aware that God's in it, and he's afraid of looking at God. So he looked at the burning bush, looked at the angel in the bush, right? Remember that he saw the angel first. So he saw the angel, he saw that the bush was burning, and he turned by Yaster. It had that. That he turned to this Kisar Lirot. He turned to see in verse 4. Now he's turning away from seeing. Just interesting. What he's taking a chance to look at and what he's now afraid to look at. So he's still hearing God, but he's afraid to look at God. Now, does this relate to later on when he's at Mount Sinai again and gets the second tablets, that God put him behind a rock so that he would not see God's face? No one can see God's face and live, the verse says there later in Exodus chapter 32, something like that. So a lot of looking and a lot of being afraid and a lot of not being allowed to look at, stemming from Mount Sinai and God's presence. Okay, so I want to go on a little bit. Time's a fleeting. We have 14 minutes left, and I want to get to God in verses 7 to 10 sets the mission forward to Moses, what God wants Moses to do. I've heard the cry of the people, and I'm sending you to bring the people out to the land flowing with milk and honey. Okay, so verse 11. I want to let's jump ahead to verse 11 on page 329. Vayomer Moshe el haElohim mi anochi ki elech el paro v'chi otzi et bnei Yisrael mi Mitzrayim. Moses says to God, or to the God, that's what haElohim. Moses says to God, to the God, who am I to go before Pharaoh and to bring out the children of Israel from Egypt? What makes me worthy to do this? Or I don't think I'm worthy. I'm unclear which one it is. I don't think I'm worthy of bringing out the people. Who am I? Why are you choosing me to do this? 12, Vayomer ki eheye imach v'zelecha ha'ot ki anochi shalachticha b'hotziacha et ha'ami Mitzrayim ta'avdun et Elohim al ha'har hazeh. And God said, I will be with you, and this will be a sign that I have sent you when you bring the people out of Egypt to worship the God on this mountain. So the fact that you'll be bringing the people out is the sign that I exist and that I have brought you out to do this. And here's the important phrase that I want to spend the rest of our time on, verse 13. Vayomer Moshe el Elohim. Moses said to God, Hinei anochi ba el bnei Yisrael. Here I'm about to go to the people of Israel. Okay, so Moses said, okay, assume I'm going and doing this mission. I'm going to the people of Israel. Va'amarti lahem, and I said to them, Elohei avotechem shlachani alechem. The God of your ancestors has sent me to you. Now, so Moses is going to say to the people, not my God, not our God, your ancestors' God has sent me to you. V'amru li, and they'll say to me, what if they'll say to me, Ma Shemo? What is his name? What is the name of this God who sent you to us? Like as if they're testing me to know what your name is. What Ma Omar Alehem. What should I say to them? Verse 14, Vayomer Elohim, God says, El Moshe to Moses, Eheyeh asher eheyeh. I will be that which I will be. Now, why doesn't God say El Shaddai? Because Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob knew God's name as El Shaddai. And also, in the book of Genesis, God is referred to as both Yud-Heh Vav-Heh and also Elohim. So we have Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, we have Elohim, and we have El Shaddai as names of God that both Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob knew, and that we've been reading. So here's this brand new. So if the people are testing Moses, who is this God who sends you? And then Moses is going to say, Eheyeh, Asher Eheyeh. This is a name that the people have never heard before. And we as a reader have never heard this before. Eheyeh, Asher Eheyeh. Now there's a lot of comment, and we don't have the commentary. We don't have the time to look at all the commentary below the line. The literal translation is, I will be which I will be, or I will be who I will be. Okay, that's the most literal translation. I will be who I will be. And you can take that however you want to understand it, that each one of us has an individual relationship with God and a different relationship with God than every one of us. Okay, maybe that's what it means. Or it could be a whole variety of other things that the below the line suggests. What I'm pointing out is Yud He Vav He, the name of God, Yud He, one name of God that we're familiar with from the Torah already. It stems from the same root as Eheyeh, okay? But Eheyeh, Asher Eheyeh, is not a name that we think anybody knows. So to say, for Moses to say to the people that God's name, Eheyeh, Asher Eheyeh, has sent me to you, the people are saying, we haven't heard that name. We've heard El Shaddai, we've heard Yud He Vav He, we've heard Elohim. Who is this Eheyeh, Asher Eheyeh? Okay. And to reiterate or to clarify, the sentence goes on, Vayomer, and God said, Ko Tamar Livnei Israel. This is what you should say to the children of Israel, Eheyeh Shalachani Alechem. I will be has sent me to you. Okay, so this is the commentary above the line and below the line has a lot on this. There's lots of other commentaries, no matter what Chumash you're using. There's lengthy commentary about this, about these three words and how to translate these three words. It's a very, very important spiritual understanding of what God is. And that and the fact that it's in the future tense is also important too. It's not Hayiti Asher Hayiti, which is I was who I was, right? In other words, God was something, or so there is no present tense for to be. It's either past tense I was or I will be. I am. I am would be Anochi Asher Anochi. There's no lihiyot is to be. Hayiti Eheyeh. There's no hoveh. There's no. I mean, there is a present tense grammatically, but there isn't a present tense individually. There is no form of the word haya to be to in all the different forms of it. Like when we break down a verb, we said I was, you were, he was, they were, we were. Okay, I am, you are, he is, we are, you are, plural, they are. But in Hebrew, there is no it's just ani ata. There's no form of haya to go with the ani. So just saying ani, you can say I am. That also means I am. So just fascinating about Hebrew when it comes to the essence of being. We were, and there's a word for that. We will be, there's a word for that, but there's no word for we are right now, except just the pronoun that goes with it. So just linguists can make a lot out of that to understand what for Hebrew. So again, with the Eheyeh, in terms of our understanding of God's role in our life, the important thing about the Eheyeh, Asher Eheyeh, is not the past encounters that we've had with God, or the past encounters that other people in our history have had with God. The important thing is the future encounters that we will have with God. So what's important for Moses here and for the people of Israel to understand when Moses comes to them is the future, what's in store for the future, as opposed to what was in the past. And if this is an example to inspire the people to follow Moses out of Egypt and to be inspired about what could possibly be in store for them in the future as a people and in relationship to God, the future tense is really significant here and really important to teach the people that lesson. Okay, so questions or comments about this or anything so far? Because we really have to wrap up. I encourage you to read the commentary here on the page. I encourage you to read the commentary in other editions of the Chumash to get a sense of what Ehiyah Asher Ehiyah means. But spiritually, religiously, as a Jew, as Jewish people, this is really one of the important phrases in the entire Torah in terms of our relationship with God. The future tense that there's always more to our relationship with God. Okay, have a good rest of the day, everybody. Stay healthy and wish you a good rest of the week.
Right. Yasher Koach. See you later. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.